Their unbreakable connection, it all began on a movie set that no one expected would change two lives forever. The year was 1994, and Sandra Bullock was a rising star trying to prove herself in Hollywood. Keanu Reeves was already known for his quiet charm, his humble nature, and that mysterious calm that made people curious. When they first met on the set of Speed, there was no grand introduction, no dramatic spark. Yet something invisible happened in that moment, something that would keep the world talking for decades. From the first day of filming, their chemistry was undeniable. They laughed easily between takes, shared quiet conversations while waiting for the next shot, and somehow built a rhythm that felt effortless. The crew noticed it. Even the director whispered that there was something different between them. When Speed was released, the audience didn't just see two action heroes saving lives, they saw a connection that felt real, almost too real. People began to ask, were they acting, or was there something more? Keanu, known for being private and soft-spoken, surprised many when he praised Sandra openly. He called her smart, funny, and beautiful, but in a way that didn't sound like a compliment for the cameras. It felt genuine, like he truly admired her as a person. Sandra, on her side, spoke of him as one of the kindest souls she had ever met. She often said that he listened more than he spoke, and that his silence carried warmth, not distance. As the years passed, Hollywood kept pairing them in the public's imagination. Fans begged for a reunion, and their wish came true when they starred together again in the Lake House in 2006. Once more, their chemistry was impossible to ignore. But this time, something had changed. They were older, wiser, and both carried quiet scars from life. And maybe that's what made their bond even deeper. There was a tenderness between them, a calm understanding that spoke louder than any romantic line in the script. Interviews from that time showed glimpses of something unspoken. When Sandra was asked if she had ever dated Keanu, she laughed, saying no because maybe they would have ruined something special. And yet her smile after saying that told a different story. Keanu, when asked the same question, paused, looked down for a moment and softly said, "She's someone I really admire, always have." Those few words made headlines, and fans all over the world started to believe there was something between them that neither of them dared to define. Their friendship became a mystery the world loved to solve. Social media filled with theories, edits, and quotes. Fans called them the perfect what-if couple. Some said they were soulmates who met at the wrong time. Others believed their bond was proof that true connection didn't always need romance. Through it all, Sandra and Keanu never fed the rumors, but they never denied the magic either. Behind the fame and the flashing cameras, both of them carried their own personal battles. Keanu faced unimaginable loss in his life, losing people he loved deeply. Sandra, too, went through heartbreaks and moments of loneliness despite her success. And yet, whenever they met at events or interviews, there was always that same warmth, the same laughter that began decades ago on a movie set. People often say Hollywood friendships fade quickly, swallowed by fame and distance, but theirs didn't. It endured quietly, without the need for attention or labels. They supported each other from afar, appearing in each other's stories not through gossip, but through respect. Their unbreakable connection became a symbol of how two people could remain important in each other's lives without needing to explain it to the world. As the world kept wondering about their unfinished business, they continued to live their lives with grace. Keanu, with his calm humility, often seen helping strangers or riding the subway like any regular person. Sandra, with her compassionate energy, balancing motherhood and her love for acting with quiet dignity. In many ways, their connection mirrored who they were, gentle, respectful, and timeless. And maybe that is why the fascination never ended. Because deep down, people didn't just see two celebrities. They saw something human, something pure. They saw a connection that made them believe in kindness, patience, and the beauty of what might have been. As their story continues, new questions will rise. But for now, one truth remains. Whatever they share, it is something beyond words and beyond time. The what-if moments for years. The world had watched Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves share a rare kind of bond, one that never needed words to prove its strength. But somewhere between the laughter on film sets and the respectful distance off-screen, the question began to grow louder. What if they had fallen in love? What if, behind the smiles and interviews, there was something deeper they chose not to explore? These questions became the heartbeat of countless fan theories. Talk shows, magazines, and even social media accounts built around their friendship all seemed to circle the same thought. Maybe Sandra and Keanu were meant for each other, but life had other plans. It wasn't just curiosity. People were drawn to the possibility that two people who respected and admired each other so deeply might have shared a quiet, unspoken love story that never found its moment. In interviews, small details began to fuel those dreams. Once, Sandra confessed during a light-hearted conversation that she had a crush on Keanu while filming Speed. The audience laughed, but her words carried weight. She described how he made her feel safe, how his kindness made every scene easier. The host quickly asked if Keanu ever knew, and Sandra smiled, shaking her head. "No, I don't think he did," she said softly. Months later, in another interview, Keanu was asked the same question. Had he ever had a crush on Sandra? His answer stunned everyone. He smiled that shy Keanu smile and said, "She didn't know? I did too." The audience gasped. The internet exploded. Two people who had secretly liked each other at the same time, yet neither ever said a word. That single moment became one of the most replayed clips of their lives. The what if that fans had whispered for years suddenly felt real. People began imagining how different things might have been if one of them had spoken up. But maybe that silence was what made their story so special. In a world where celebrities often rushed into drama, Sandra and Keanu had chosen grace. They valued friendship more than impulse. They protected something pure by not forcing it into the shape of romance. Still, every time they appeared together, the air seemed to change. During promotional tours for the lake house, the cameras caught glances that said more than words ever could. In one moment, Sandra touched Keanu's arm while laughing, and his eyes softened instantly. In another, he leaned close to whisper something during an interview, and her face lit up with the same warmth she had back in 1994. People noticed. Fans wrote captions like, "Some things never fade," and "Unfinished business lives forever." But beneath the smiles, both of them carried complicated lives. Keanu's heart had been through tragedy. Losing his girlfriend and unborn child years earlier had changed him forever. It left him quieter, more introspective, more protective of the people he let close. Sandra, too, had faced betrayal and heartbreak, rebuilding her world through strength and self-reliance. Maybe that's why their timing never aligned. Both had walls built from pain, and neither wanted to risk losing the rare peace they found in each other's presence. Society, however, has always loved to play matchmaker. Fans couldn't accept that two people could share so much affection and still remain just friends. There were endless online debates, interviews analyzed frame by frame, even fan edits imagining what their life together might look like. Some joked that they were a love story paused by destiny. Others called them the ultimate proof that true connection doesn't always mean romance. And yet the fascination kept growing. Every few years, a new rumor would surface. A dinner, a photo, a quiet sighting in Los Angeles. Sometimes true, sometimes not. But every rumor carried hope. The same hope that maybe this time, they would finally realize what the world already saw. Still, both Sandra and Keanu continued to speak about each other with the same steady affection. She once said, "He's someone I'll always respect. No matter where life takes us." He said, "She's a wonderful person, and I'm lucky to know her." These weren't grand confessions, but they felt more real than any headline. They came from hearts that understood timing, loyalty, and boundaries. As the years passed, that what if became less about romance and more about destiny. Maybe their unfinished business wasn't about love denied, but about something deeper, the kind of spiritual connection that teaches you how to see the world with more kindness. Maybe they weren't meant to be partners in love, but mirrors in life, showing each other what grace under pressure truly looks like. Still, for fans and dreamers across generations, one question remains, lingering like the final note of a song that refuses to fade. What if they were always meant to find each other, just not to have each other? Keanu's uncharacteristic openness. Keanu Reeves had always been known for his quiet grace. In a world full of noise and ego, he was the rare kind of star who moved gently through fame. He never chased headlines, never raised his voice, and never used his pain as a story to sell. But when it came to Sandra Bullock, something shifted. People began to notice that his calm, private shell would soften whenever her name came up. It was subtle, a small smile, a pause before answering, a tone that carried warmth even in the simplest words. And for someone as guarded as Keanu, that meant everything. In one rare interview, when the host mentioned Sandra, Keanu's eyes brightened. He said, "She's funny, she's talented, she's just great." It wasn't the words that caught attention. It was the sincerity behind them. There was no performance, no need to charm. It was just honesty. Fans replayed that clip again and again, noticing how his whole face changed when he spoke about her. For a man who rarely showed emotion in public, his openness toward Sandra became its own quiet confession. Their friendship seemed to exist in a space beyond Hollywood. During events, he would often wait for her to finish interviews before leaving. If they met on stage, his gestures were small but protective, letting her walk ahead, pulling out a chair, offering a reassuring glance. There was something old-fashioned and gentle about the way he treated her. And Sandra, always strong and independent, responded with that same mix of humor and affection that only she could give. Behind the cameras, stories began to surface from people who had worked with them. One crew member from the lake house recalled how Keanu once drove miles just to deliver her favorite champagne for her birthday. There was no publicity, no cameras, just a quiet gesture that said more than any grand gift could. When Sandra later mentioned that moment in an interview, she smiled and said, "That's just Keanu, thoughtful in ways no one expects." Keanu's openness wasn't just in gestures. It showed in how he seemed more relaxed when she was around. His usual stillness gave way to laughter. His short answers turned into full stories, and his guarded energy melted into ease. In one press conference, while everyone else was talking about box office numbers, Keanu and Sandra shared a private joke that made them both laugh uncontrollably. That video went viral not because of what they said, but because of how natural they were together, like two old souls who had known each other forever. What made this openness more striking was the contrast it created. Keanu was a man shaped by loss, someone who had learned to protect his heart by keeping it quiet. After the tragedies in his life, he rarely spoke about personal matters. Yet, when Sandra's name appeared, his silence turned into calm warmth. It was as if she reminded him that the world could still be gentle. Fans began calling their friendship Keanu's safe place. They noticed how he seemed lighter in those moments, how the usual sadness in his eyes faded just a little. It wasn't romantic in a loud or dramatic way, but it carried the kind of comfort that only comes from deep trust. And Sandra understood that trust. She never pushed him to open up more than he wanted to. Instead, she matched his pace, laughing with him when he needed laughter, staying silent when words weren't necessary. That mutual respect became the foundation of something that felt rare in Hollywood, a bond without expectation. In another interview, Keanu spoke about kindness and connection. He said, "Sometimes people come into your life and make it better just by being there." He didn't name anyone, but those who knew his story believed he was speaking of Sandra, because for him she wasn't just a co-star or a friend. She was a reminder that not all human connections fade with time. There was even one moment that many fans still talk about, when Keanu attended a charity event quietly, without announcing it just because Sandra was hosting. He stayed in the back, spoke little, but his presence meant everything. When reporters asked her later why he had come, she smiled and said, "Because that's what good people do. He's one of them." Through these small glimpses, the world saw a side of Keanu rarely visible, open, soft, and quietly joyful. And maybe that was the true magic of their bond. She didn't change him, she reminded him it was safe to be himself. In her company, the man who had carried so much pain could simply be. Their friendship became a silent lesson in emotional honesty, not through confessions or grand speeches, but through the simple courage of showing warmth in a world that often hides it. And in that quiet courage, Keanu revealed more of his soul than he ever had before. Because sometimes, openness doesn't come from speaking. It comes from the way your eyes soften when someone's name is mentioned. And for Keanu Reeves, that name was, and perhaps always will be, Sandra Bullock. Sandra's enduring affection for Sandra Bullock, life had been a constant balance between strength and softness. Behind the laughter, the quick wit, and the confident red carpet smile lived a woman who had learned to carry pain with quiet grace. Through her decades in Hollywood, she had seen fame rise and fade, love come and go, but there was one presence that never shifted: Keanu Reeves. His name always seemed to sit gently in her heart, untouched by time or change. When Sandra spoke about Keanu, her tone was always tender. It wasn't the loud admiration of a fan or the formality of a colleague. It was warmer, quieter, almost like gratitude. In interviews, she often found herself smiling at the mere mention of him. "He's a good man," she would say, her eyes softening. "Really, really good." Those few words always carried something deeper, an affection that lived somewhere between friendship and something she never wanted to label. Throughout her career, Sandra faced the harsh lights of fame, scandals she didn't deserve, heartbreaks she never asked for, and expectations that weighed heavy on her shoulders. Yet through every storm, when interviewers asked about the people who made a difference in her journey, Keanu's name was always there. She once said, "He's one of those people who makes you feel seen. Even in silence, he listens." It was a rare confession in a world built on noise. Sandra had watched Keanu evolve from a young actor into one of Hollywood's most beloved figures. She had seen his tragedies, his losses, his quiet resilience, and in each chapter, her respect for him only grew. Once, when a journalist asked if she would ever consider working with him again, Sandra didn't hesitate. She smiled and said, "In a heartbeat, I'd do anything with Keanu." It wasn't about career or fame. It was about trust, about a kind of bond that couldn't be faked or forced. Behind the scenes, she often spoke of him with that same fondness to her close friends. She admired his humility, his ability to stay grounded in a world that rewards arrogance. She loved how he treated everyone equally, from camera operators to fans waiting in the cold. And perhaps most of all, she admired how he never changed for the spotlight. He remained the same kind soul she met on that speed set decades ago. There were times when their paths crossed unexpectedly, at award shows, charity galas, or quiet industry gatherings. Whenever cameras caught them together, the air seemed lighter. She would laugh. He would smile. And for a brief moment, the years between them seemed to disappear. People watching would always say the same thing. They looked at each other like two old souls who had shared something the world could never understand. When Sandra adopted her children and began focusing on her life as a mother, her world shifted again. She became more private, protective, and grounded. Yet even then, when asked about the people she trusted most in Hollywood, Keanu's name appeared once more. "He's gentle," she said once in a quiet interview. "He's got this kindness that doesn't fade." She didn't talk about him often, but when she did, it felt like she was talking about someone who had shaped her view of what true goodness looks like. Over the years, rumors continued to swirl. Old interviews resurfaced, videos replayed, fans demanded answers. Yet Sandra always managed to navigate it all with grace. She never mocked the speculation, never dismissed the idea harshly. Instead, she smiled, sometimes playfully, and let the question float unanswered. "People like good stories," she once said softly. "I get it." But then she paused and added, "Some stories aren't meant to be finished." That single line became famous, quoted across social media and fan pages. Some stories aren't meant to be finished. For many, it was her quiet acknowledgement of what everyone had felt. That maybe her story with Keanu wasn't about beginnings or endings, but about constancy. When Sandra faced heartbreak in her personal life, fans noticed how she carried herself with dignity. She never spoke badly of anyone. She focused on her children, her craft, her peace. And though she never said it directly, many believed that her friendship with Keanu reminded her of something pure. that goodness still existed in the world. She once said, "When life gets heavy, there are certain people whose kindness keeps you steady. He's one of them." There was something eternal about the affection she held for him. Not passionate in the cinematic sense, but tender, enduring, and quietly sacred. It was the kind of love that didn't need to be declared to be real. It lived in her smile, her tone, and the warmth that filled every memory she shared of him. And maybe that's what made their story so powerful. It wasn't built on drama or headlines. It was built on years of shared respect, gentle laughter, and silent loyalty. In a world that often mistakes noise for love, Sandra and Keanu's connection whispered instead, steady, humble, and infinite. The legacy of lingering questions by the time the world entered 2025, the story of Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves had already become something far bigger than just two names. It had turned into a feeling, a quiet, nostalgic ache that people carried with them. On social media, in interviews, and even in fan art, their connection lived on like a song that refused to end. Every time a new photo of them appeared, even years apart, it sparked the same conversation. Why does this bond still move us so deeply? The truth was, people saw themselves in them, in their missed chances, in their mutual respect, in their silent affection that never turned into a headline romance. For millions, their story became a reflection of the kind of connection everyone dreams about, something that defies explanation, distance, and time. They were proof that two souls could stay linked, even when life pulled them in different directions. Every few months, an old interview clip would resurface, Sandra laughing about her crush on Keanu, Keanu's shy smile when someone mentioned her name. Fans would comment things like, "The way he looks at her says everything," or "They're soulmates in another timeline." People analyzed body language, exchanged theories, even created digital montages showing how their friendship evolved through decades. It wasn't gossip anymore. It was admiration. It was hope. Hollywood often celebrates stories of passion and chaos, fast love, quick endings, and public heartbreaks. But Sandra and Keanu represented something different. They showed that love, in its purest form, doesn't always need to be claimed. It can exist quietly, respectfully, and still feel infinite. That message, in a world desperate for authenticity, resonated more than any romantic drama ever could. For Keanu, his kindness and humility became legendary. People noticed how he lived simply, how he stayed grounded despite immense fame. And every time he did something good, giving up his seat, helping strangers, donating silently, fans often linked that same quiet goodness to the way he treated Sandra. One fan wrote online, "You can tell how a man loves by how he speaks of his friends. Keanu speaks of her like she's art." It was poetic, but it was true. Sandra, too, carried her grace into every chapter of her life. She became a devoted mother, an advocate for children and kindness, a symbol of emotional strength. And still, through all of it, her affection for Keanu remained unshaken. She didn't need to prove it. The way she smiled when his name came up was enough. There was no performance, only memory. The public fascination refused to fade because it wasn't about scandal. It was about what people felt when they saw them together. They saw love in its gentlest form, one without ownership, without expectation, without ego. Maybe that's why even now, in October 2025, their story still finds new life every time someone replays an old clip or shares a photo from the Speed premiere. In one touching interview earlier that year, a journalist asked Keanu what he thought about the public's obsession with his unfinished business with Sandra. He smiled thoughtfully and said, "People like happy endings, but sometimes the story is happy just because it happened." Those words echoed across the internet, quoted on thousands of posts, reminding everyone that some connections don't need to end to have meaning. In another appearance, Sandra was asked if she believed in soulmates. She paused for a long moment, then replied softly, "I believe some people enter your life and never really leave it. They stay, in your heart, in your peace, in your story." She didn't say a name, but no one needed her to. The world already knew who she was talking about. Their friendship had outlasted most Hollywood marriages. It had survived distance, silence, and the weight of time. And still, whenever their paths crossed, it felt like no time had passed at all. Even without grand gestures or confessions, they had created something timeless, a legacy of respect, compassion, and deep emotional truth. Maybe that's why people continue to ask questions. Maybe it's not because they want a romantic ending, but because they want to believe that bonds like this still exist. In a world that moves too fast, their story reminds us to slow down, to value kindness, to treasure the people who understand us even when we're quiet. As the years move forward, Sandra and Keanu's unfinished business will continue to inspire countless others, not as a mystery to be solved, but as a lesson to be felt. That sometimes love doesn't have to be loud to be real. Sometimes its silence is what makes it eternal. And perhaps that is their true legacy. Two hearts that met in a fleeting moment of film, yet somehow created a connection that outlived everything else. The final reflection. Beyond love and time, as the years moved quietly forward, Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves became more than actors in people's memories. They became symbols of grace, of patience, and of the kind of connection that doesn't need to end to stay alive. Their story, filled with laughter, missed chances, and unspoken affection, continued to remind millions of what truly matters. By 2025, both had built their own peaceful worlds. Sandra was living a life centered around her children, choosing privacy over spotlight. She had learned that love wasn't about grand declarations, but about presence, showing up for those who mattered, no matter the noise of the world. Keanu, too, had found his rhythm again. He kept working, kept giving, kept living quietly among the chaos of Hollywood. Both had chosen kindness over attention, depth over drama, and yet the invisible thread between them remained. When they occasionally appeared together, the air seemed to shift. At a film festival in early 2025, they reunited on stage for a tribute segment to Speed. Decades had passed since that first film, but the same warmth returned instantly. When Sandra walked out, the audience cheered, and Keanu stood up instinctively, offering her his hand as she climbed the small stage steps. Their eyes met for a second, just a second. But that was enough. The crowd went silent. Cameras flashed, and the world felt something it couldn't quite describe. Later, backstage, a journalist asked them about the moment. Sandra laughed softly and said, "He's still the same gentleman I met 30 years ago." Keanu smiled, replying, "And she's still got that laugh that can light up a whole room." It was simple, honest, and full of something deeper than nostalgia. What made their connection so lasting wasn't mystery or romance. It was recognition. They saw each other for who they truly were. Two souls who had faced the highs and lows of life with quiet strength. In each other, they found someone who understood without explanation. And that, more than love, was what made their story timeless. The fascination from the public never faded because, in a way, it wasn't just their story anymore. It belonged to everyone who had ever loved someone from afar, who had ever missed a chance, who had ever carried kindness instead of regret. People saw in Sandra and Keanu the reminder that not every ending has to be final. Some bonds simply keep echoing, in memories, in smiles, in silence. During one late-night interview that year, a host asked Sandra a quiet question. "Do you ever wish you and Keanu had become more than friends?" She paused, thinking deeply before answering. "No," she said finally. "What we have is enough. It's real, it's lasting, and it's kind. And sometimes that's more powerful than love." The audience fell silent. Because in her calm voice, people heard truth. Not regret, not longing, but peace. A few months later, Keanu was asked a similar question. His response was simple. "People call it unfinished business," he said, smiling faintly. "But I think we finished it the moment we met. Some connections complete you even if they never become something else." Those two statements, her peace and his acceptance, became the final chapter of their story. It wasn't a love story that ended in heartbreak, nor one that bloomed into romance. It was something in between, a lesson about connection, timing, and the beauty of what endures. Their journey taught the world that some people enter your life not to change its direction, but to show you its depth. They remind you that kindness outlives passion, and respect outlasts distance. They teach you that true affection doesn't fade. It simply evolves into something purer, something infinite. And so, in the quiet corners of memory, Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves will always exist, side by side, hearts aligned even if not entwined. Two souls who showed the world that love, in its truest form, doesn't always need a label. Sometimes it just needs time.